These videos take a long time to record and edit. It would mean a lot to me if you could leave a like and subscribe. If you enjoy this video, leave a comment about your favorite part. It will get pinned and hearted. Now let's get into the story. Luffy felt someone pinch his nose. Embarrassed, he slowly opened his eyes before closing them again because of the light of the sun's rays, which immediately dazzled him. Then, in front of him, he saw the silhouette of a small head bent over his face. Still a little dazed, he closed his eyes and ended up opening them wide. A few seconds later, this time, he could clearly make out the outlines of a small monkey's face. It was barely 40 centimeters long, with a tail the length of its body, and was covered in white and black fur. When his vision returned to almost normal, Luffy could see that it was this little primate who was having fun putting its fingers in his nose. Seeing this, Luffy was much more surprised to see the animal, rather than worrying about what it was doing with his nose. Am I dreaming? What is he doing here? Feeling the monkey pinch his nose, Luffy winced, feeling pain. Realizing that he not dreaming, the boy immediately got up, making a sound of astonishment. Surprised by this abrupt gesture, the monkey let out a shrill cry as it fled before finding refuge in the nearest tree. Hey, a monkey, Luffy stammered, seeing it disappear into the foliage of his shelter. Immediately, he found that the place where he was far from resembling the inside of the plane in which he was. He looked around and discovered a landscape worthy of a rainforest. Huge trees surrounded him as far as the eye could see, while large vines curled around their trunks. At the same time, he saw a multitude of bushes and shrubs that were almost twice their size. There was even a bunch of plants he couldn't identify, so they were weird. Huge, wild, mysterious. These are the words that define this place. Screams here and there were heard everywhere around Luffy, showing that this place was far from uninhabited. What is this joke? How come I'm here? But I was on the plane, and the plane crash suddenly resurfaced in his mind. Then, one by one, each of the events that triggered the crash came back to it. The tremors, the loss of altitude, and most of all, the completely black sky. Yet none of this could explain what he was doing in such a place. Where did I fall, exactly? If I remember correctly, we were over the ocean, so I can only have stumbled upon an isolated island. But why is there no one else with me? Am I the only survivor, or what? The thought made him shiver from head to toe. He refused to believe in this possibility. He couldn't be the only person to survive the plane crash. In truth, he didn't even know if the plane had really crashed, since he couldn't see the slightest trace of the plane's wreckage anywhere around him. By the way, where's the plane? Even trying to look around, he couldn't see a single part of the device. Luffy had the strange feeling of having been moved away from what was to remain of its carcass, which seemed even stranger. Sitting cross-legged, Luffy tried to figure out what was going on, while several question marks seemed to appear above his head. How is this possible? If I was on the plane during the crash, there's no way I could have landed here. Unless I'm dead and my soul rests in the Garden of Eden. Thinking about having become a real ghost, Luffy got up and stared at a tree. Without hesitation, he ran towards it and let his body crash into its trunk. However, instead of going through the tree, like a ghost would, Luffy felt himself stop dead on impact, before falling backwards, with blood pouring from his nose. However, instead of screaming in pain, he laughed. Shihihihi. Great, I'm still alive. Then, performing a jump, he stood up again before feeling a horrible pain in his head. Ouch, it's worse than when Nami hits me. Looking around, to see only trees, Luffy really found the place very strange. Finding no clue that could help him know where he was, he ended up looking for possible survivors. Ace, N8MI, are you there? No answer. USOPP, S8NJI. Again, his efforts were in vain. Frightened to see that there was a good chance that he was indeed alone on this desert island, Luffy began to run, to continue his research more quickly. Oi, does he have someone? 15 minutes later, stopping running, Luffy collapsed at the foot of a tree. Exhausted and terrified. Nothing. He hadn't found any clue allowing him to affirm that there was another possible survivor on these places. Even someone like Luffy was scared, not knowing where his brother and his friends were. This isn't real, he mouthed, still holding his head. Yes, that can't be real. It's impossible that this place is a desert island. Besides, normally, the plane must have been close to where I was. And why isn't anyone answering me? Suddenly, having a great idea, he took out his cell phone, which didn't seem to have been damaged. Awesome, he gloated, turning it on. With that, I'm going to call Ace. However, the hope disappeared as he found that there was no network. He couldn't call anyone. Devastated, Luffy lost his smile before standing still, staring blankly. He wasn't the smartest person in the world, and he wondered if that was why he didn't know what to do. Someone, please, someone answer me. Apart from the strange noises he heard all around him, the only cry he heard was that of his stomach. Far from being as saddened as Luffy, he was trying to make him understand that it was completely empty, and that Luffy wouldn't be able to continue his research if he didn't fill it. At that moment, Luffy noticed that he was hungry, and that he was also very thirsty. However, there was nothing around him that could allow him to solve any of his many problems. There is no one here, and no water or food either, he thought, lying on the ground, his head resting against the foot of the tree. If I don't die of loneliness, it will be of hunger or thirst. Suddenly, something caught his attention. A cricket had just landed less than 2 meters in front of him, resembling, to be mistaken, those that we can see in the countryside. I was nevertheless amazed by its size. The insect measured at least 10 centimeters, a giant among insects. The idea of trying to catch him suddenly popped into his mind. After all, when he was little, in order to strengthen him, with a view to transforming him into a future soldier or policeman, his grandfather had taken him many times into the middle of the forest, so that he could learn to survive with this that he could find in nature. He had already eaten several insects, being far from being a person disgusted to feed on them. To fill his stomach, as long as it was edible, he was ready to eat anything. In any case, his stomach showed itself again. However, before he could make a move to try to catch it, something got ahead of him and made the cricket disappear. Indeed, dropping from the branch of a tree, a small rodent, resembling a gray flying squirrel, landed in front of the cricket, before grabbing it between its paws. The unfortunate insect was then brought to its mouth, and Luffy saw it get swallowed whole in one bite. Hey, that was my meal. Cheeks swollen, while it stopped chewing, the rodent stared at him at that moment. 20 centimeters long, it looked like a stuffed animal. Plus, it had adorable big brown eyes, which would have made any girl want to hug it. When he had swallowed its meal, he ended up turning its back and took the tangent, fleeing in the vegetation. The seer left. Luffy was somewhat saddened. Come to think of it, that squirrel seemed to be 10 times bigger and more appetizing than the cricket I had just eaten. Pity. I would not have said no to a squirrel on the spit. At that moment, a new noise was heard coming from the bush right next to Luffy. Eventually, he began to believe that this island might be home to a large supply of food. What will appear now? A meat vendor. A creature came out of the bush, and its physique exceeded anything Luffy could have imagined. With a body taller than that of a Labrador and a tail of a rat measuring about 1 meter. The animal had, to complete the whole, a head and a body of a beaver. It was similar in color to Ginger, with a few black spots on its back, and provided with long hairs that formed a thick fur. Luffy also noticed that his paws, ending in 4 claws, were webbed. At first, Luffy was so amazed by the newcomer that he stood motionless for a few seconds and just stared at it. Then he ended up surprised. A rat's tail that grew behind the body of a beaver. As if to answer his question, the animal uttered a little cry which, strangely, resembled the mewing of a cat. Hearing this, Luffy was even more amazed by this strange creature. Yet he couldn't help but be fascinated by it. This beaver was unique and looked like the fusion of several animals, and that's what made Luffy curious. Cool. Standing up, he began to walk towards the beaver. Immediately, seeing him approaching of it, the animal reared up on its hind legs and tried to use its enormous size to scare Luffy away. In this posture, it was the same height as the boy, while it clicked its enormous incisors. Yet again, Luffy stared at it in fascination. It was the first time he felt this feeling so much. For a long time, Luffy had often considered his student life to be boring. Always, he hadn't wanted to accept the fact of having to behave like a normal person, to live a life of ordinary worker. He had always wanted to see something mind-blowing, finding yourself in a situation where there was no logic. At this moment, almost forgetting the reason for his presence here, he correctly put his straw hat on his head before displaying a broad smile. I like you. Undaunted by its size, the giant beaver got back on its 4 legs. Then, letting out another meow, he ended up heading in the opposite direction to Luffy and went away through the vegetation. Apparently, it didn't seem to want to fight the boy and opted instead to flee, lest Luffy decide to fight it. Seeing him leave, Luffy crossed his arms before tilting his head to the side. At that moment, he turned on what served as his brain and thought, this animal is a beaver. Beavers live by the water's edge, so this beaver surely returns home. So, if I follow it, I will find. Immediately, he started running after the giant beaver. Following the beaver for about 20 minutes, Luffy had finally come out of the forest and found himself in front of a stream. Measuring about 6 meters wide, it came from a waterfall, which fell not far from there. Without wasting a moment, Luffy rushed to the riverbank and immediately dunked his head in the water. His guide, meanwhile, had already entered the stream and had ended up disappearing at the same time as the high school student was drinking. And they church, I'm saved, Luffy exclaimed, sticking his head out of the river, totally hydrated. I now understand why I am constantly told that water represents life. But the best came moments later. Along the bank for about 30 meters, Luffy discovered, not far from the river, a tree with fruits in its foliage. Managing to grab hold of the lowest branch, he was able to bring some fruit closer to him. Starting to salivate, Luffy grabbed the fruit, which was closest to my hand. At first glance, it was a kind of yellow apple the size of a plum. Luffy had no way of knowing if this fruit was edible or poisonous. Yet, without the slightest hesitation, he gulps down the fruit in one gulp. However, he immediately regretted, feeling his teeth crunch into something hard. Instantly, he spat out what looked like a peach-like pit, before probing his teeth to be certain that none of his molars had broken. Damn core. Despite this small accident, his hunger pushed him to take another fruit, then another, and yet another. Eventually, he ate so much fruit that a pile of pits formed at his feet. When his stomach was finally satisfied, he decided to sit down at the foot of the tree, heaving a contented sigh. After many efforts, his situation had finally improved. What a pleasure to have a full stomach, I thought, closing my eyes. At least I don't think I can starve on this island. It reminds me of many survival trips with Grandpa. Then, without realizing it, tired because of all the effort he had just made, he ended up falling asleep. Luffy didn't know how long he stayed asleep near the river. In any case, it was the sound of footsteps that ended up waking him up. Opening his eyes to find out who was the cause of his awakening, he saw a small animal heading in his direction. At first glance, it was a small horse, but barely a quarter of the size of a pony. If its ridiculous height made it look quite strange, it was nothing compared to the fact that he had no hooves. Instead, it had 4 fingers on each of its paws, ending in small claws. Its coat was, meanwhile, a light gray dotted with small stripes. Clearly, the animals on this island are far from normal, Luffy thought. Yet that's what makes them interesting. I hope I can meet a carnivorous kangaroo or a crocodile that can sprint. Approaching Luffy cautiously, the animal became interested in one of the fruits he had dropped on the ground, satiating himself. Sniffing it for a few moments, it then bit into it, showing that it posed no risk to Luffy. You don't know where we are, by any chance? Luffy asked it. I don't live here and I got lost. The animal, surely annoyed, took the rest of its meal and went to finish it further. Hey, you could help me. Seeing the animal running away, Luffy finally heaved a sigh, as he found himself all alone again. The island he was on really seemed to be deserted and devoid of any trace of humanity. If it is, I am really on a desert island. This is a real problem. What should I do? To think that right now I'd probably be at home, probably eating with Ace and my grandfather. Grandpa, I wonder if he's worried about me. Luffy wondered, starting to think about the person who raised him. Finally, Luffy went back to thinking about his friends he had been separated from. Usopp, Sanji, Nami, everyone. I refused to believe they died. Yes, they survived, at least one of them. But the more Luffy thought about it, the more desperate he seemed. In this kind of situation, his lack of intelligence made him appreciate that one of his friends was with him to propose a plan to improve their situation. His brain was unable to comprehend what had happened. In particular, the reason for the sudden change in the color of the sky during the accident. Even Luffy knew it was scientifically impossible for such a thing to actually happen. While he pondered his misfortunes, the wind came carrying sounds, like words, to his ears. Help! Hub! Luffy stood up immediately, all his senses heightened. A voice. He had just heard a voice. Was it my imagination? Come help me. Luffy heard. This time he was sure. There really was another person on this island. Great! Luffy yelled, running towards the direction the scream seemed to come from. There's someone else here. Hey, where are you? As he ran, he tried to compare the voice he had just heard to all the others he knew. But nothing to do. He couldn't identify the person who called for help. All he knew was that it sounded like a female voice. Anyway, he didn't care who it was. The most important thing was that Luffy was no longer alone on this cursed island. Again, a long smile appeared on my face. Lost in his thoughts, he had barely noticed that he had come out of the forest and found himself in a kind of plain. All he saw around him was a sun-yellowed grassy floor and a leafless tree roughly in the center of the landscape. But all this seemed very banal and uninteresting to him, until Luffy noticed, next to the tree, that was the biggest and most monstrous bird he had ever seen. If the beaver had already surprised him, the creature in front of him had made him open his mouth so wide that he almost snapped his jaw. What is this monster? The bird, if he could call it that, was built like an ostrich. On the other hand, it was easily 6 feet tall, nearly twice Luffy's height. Its legs, long and powerful, had 3 fingers ending in enormous claws, at least 6 inches long. It had an enormous head, ending in a gigantic hooked beak like those of parrots. The plumage that covered its body was deep black, while that of its neck was white. It had small wings that Luffy compared to those of a chicken, so much so that they were tiny, as well as ridiculous, compared to the rest of its body. Raising his head, Luffy made no effort to close his mouth, which was still wide open. Again, he was both fascinated by the animal he saw, but also frightened by its size and appearance. Is it real? Noticing that its head slightly resembled that of a parrot, he wondered. That fat chicken called me. Does he know how to talk? Then, forgetting the notion of danger, he rummaged in his pockets to take out his cell phone. Then he started taking the bird's picture. It looks like a chocobo. However, at that moment, Luffy noticed that the bird's eyes were the same as a vulture's. He had the look of someone who could kill without the slightest feeling of pity or guilt. In any case, the potential danger of the situation ends up making Luffy back down. But no sooner had he taken a step back than the bird uttered a horrible shrill cry. As Luffy clapped his hands over his ears, the bird came towards him, sprinting 30 meters in 2 seconds. It had covered the equivalent of half an Olympic basin in the space of 2 seconds. Honestly, Usain Bolt would have been humiliated racing with this animal. In any case, hardly Luffy saw it running that the bird was already in front of him. Far from wanting to stop there, he followed this incredible performance with a side kick, worthy of a great karateka. Saved by a reflex, Luffy jumped to the side to avoid, in extremis, the powerful kick. Instead of the boy, it was the tree behind him that got hit. The creature had left 3 huge marks with its destructive claws in the bark that covered its trunk. If Luffy got kicked by the bird, he would die. Understanding the strength of this animal, Luffy then rushed to the edge of the forest before flattening himself against the ground. Face down, hiding behind a bush, he decided to wait for his attacker to leave, hoping that he would. Honestly, he felt a bead of sweat running down his forehead, caused by fear. Still, Luffy hit the palm of his hand with his fist, as if he wanted to fight the giant bird. He had always liked to fight and was a good fighter. However, he had never fought an opponent like this ostrich. If that bird wants to fight, I'll kick his ass. Anyway, he's the one who attacked me for no reason. Yet I was about to turn around. Did he want to kill me in order to devour me or to protect his territory? Knowing that he was still around, the bird stayed at the edge of the forest and turned its head in all directions, hoping to see Luffy through the vegetation. Flexing his legs, Luffy was ready to leap towards it at the slightest sign of danger. However, seeming to believe that Luffy was too frightened to attempt anything in its presence, the ostrich decided to finally turn around, and the boy saw it turn back towards the center of the meadow. Is he leaving? When he was certain that there was no longer any danger, Luffy stood up and watched his assailant leave. It was at this moment that he saw, at the foot of the single tree, in the center of the plain, a kind of mound of earth and branches, resembling a nest 30 centimeters high and 2 meters in diameter. Luffy had been so amazed by the creature's presence that he hadn't noticed this detail before. Seeing it, he immediately understood why this creature had just attacked me. Is it a nest? Oh, so this chicken is a female and it doesn't want me near its nest. Losing his will to fight, Luffy decided to leave the bird alone. But, pretending to leave, he suddenly heard, "Mugiwara, is that you?" Looking to his left, Luffy saw a person who was pinned against a tree. Despite the fact that he was covered here and there with dirt, that he had lost his cap, and that his face seemed to display a grimace of pain, Luffy recognized the high school student who had just called me. Travo. Happy to see his friend, Luffy rushed over to him, only to find that the bottom of his pants were torn and covered in small bloodstains. "Are you okay?" "It's nothing," Law affirmed, trying to get up on his own. "It just tried to destroy my leg." "You're alive. I'm so happy. Do you know where the others are?" "No idea," Law confessed, handing over that he only had his backpack and laptop with him. "Did you keep your PC with you?" "What can I do? When I woke up, it was close to me. Anyway, it's best to leave while the woman catches the bird's eye." "The woman? Is anyone else here?" Suddenly, Luffy heard a scream behind him, which made him turn around. Having taken advantage of the giant bird attacking Luffy, a woman came out of its nest before fleeing. Unfortunately for her, the creature spotted her and ran after her. A few strides were enough for it to catch up her. As soon as its prey was within reach of its beak, the bird seized her by her long pink hair and shook her in all directions. This gesture was so strong and brutal that Luffy thought that the head of the unfortunate was going to separate from her body. After a few seconds, the monster stopped this torture when the young woman stopped fidgeting. Then it brought her back to its nest, still holding her by the hair. "We have to run now," Law advised, who seemed oblivious to what he had just witnessed. "I don't want to suffer the same fate. As long as she's used as bait, this bird won't pay attention to us." To run, Luffy wondered. He wants to get out of here while that woman is getting mugged. "No way," replied the boy. Seeing his gaze as he stared at the bird and its prey, Law understood his intentions. Immediately, he began to exclaim, "Don't even think about it, Mugiwara. It's suicide. Let's go quickly." Luffy ignored him. "Let's leave this woman and run away from here." "What do you think you can do against this monster? If the bird sees us, it will surely kill us. It has already seen us once. If it sees us again, he will definitely think that we want to destroy his nest. This time he won't let us run away." "Shut up," Luffy ordered. "You're too loud." And before he had time to reply, Luffy rushed to the bird's nest, intending to save the young woman he was holding. Mugiwara. "Hey, stupid bird, come fight." Hearing him coming, the bird turned its carnivorous gaze on him before rushing in his direction. In 2 seconds, it tripled its speed and pointed its right beak at Luffy, intent on skewering him alive. It didn't take much longer for Luffy to lose a good part of his confidence. Facing this monster, coming from hell, it's not good. He is going to kill me. He is going to kill me. Nevertheless, for some reason unknown to him, he continued to run. Was it the desire to save this woman that gave me so much courage? Or was it because he had spent his whole life fighting against his grandfather and his brother, in the hope of becoming stronger? Honestly, he didn't know. All he knew was that there was little chance he could defeat his opponent. When there were only 3 meters separating them, the creature lifted one of its legs and was about to repeat the same gesture that had almost decapitated Luffy. That was the moment Luffy was waiting for. Hitting with force and speed, the bird performed a splendid kick. However, it was surprised to hit the void. Having used the momentum of his run to perform a jump, Luffy had found himself above the trajectory of the kicker, and he was now facing the head of the bird. Closing his fist, he decided to counterattack. LHHH, he cried, punching the bird's face with all his might. Stunned to be attacked like this, the bird took a step to the side and nearly lost its balance. Putting its feet on the ground, Luffy took advantage of this opportunity to run towards the ostrich's nest. Under the amazed eyes of Law. But how? Arriving near the nest, Luffy saw the young woman crying while being rolled into a ball. She was in her 20s, with pink hair and blue eyes. She was pretty enough, but her hair was messy, while she wore a stewardess uniform, torn in some places. She also had a few injuries to her arms and head, probably caused by her attacker. Nevertheless, nothing looked like a serious injury. Oi, are you okay? She jumped when she heard the voice and started staring at the high school student, as if it was the first time she had seen another person. She ends up approving. Why, yes, I believe. Despite the fact that Luffy had never seen her in the past, he recognized her voice. It was her whom he had heard earlier calling for help. Don't worry about it, he assured her, smiling confidently. I came to save you. But when he helped her up, he heard footsteps behind him, which came dangerously close. Already, he surprised, realizing who was approaching. Get down, he ordered the stewardess, while pinning her to the ground. But what? She didn't even have time to finish her sentence when a dull noise was heard above them. Looking up, Luffy could see the head of the giant ostrich just above him. Without hesitation, it rushed towards them while targeting Luffy's head. Having opened its beak to the maximum, it had again narrowly missed him, and had succeeded in perforating the trunk of the tree, at the exact place where the head was, before bending down. Within 2 minutes, Luffy had just escaped death a third time. That damn chicken really wants to kill me. Luckily, this scatterbrained bird had found itself with its beak stuck in the trunk of the tree, and couldn't pull it out, even by exerting pressure, by putting its foot on the trunk of the tree. It hardly managed to free its hooked beak. Very quickly, the duo realized that they had to take advantage of the opportunity presented to them to escape. Okay, get up, Luffy ordered, taking the young woman's arm. We have to leave. The stewardess tried to get up but grimaced, pressing down on her right leg. I can't get up. What? Fearing that the monster would break free at any moment, Luffy immediately carried her in his arms, like a Prince Charming who would carry his princess. Then, like a stallion, he ran away, hoping that the bird would remain a prisoner for a little while. If he had to continue to carry the adult in his arms, he would be unable to fight at the same time. A few seconds later, he joined Law, who immediately began to shout. What do you have instead of the brain? Do you realize that you could have died? You really are a pure unconscious, Mugiwara. Hey, I didn't do this for nothing, Luffy affirmed. I saved that woman and it stuck. Besides, you could have helped me. And then what? I'm not used to facing death to save a stranger. A piercing scream was suddenly heard behind them, as well as heavy and rapid footsteps. They didn't have to look back to know that the bird had managed to unstuck its beak from the tree and seemed to be furious that someone had had the audacity to steal what belonged to it. I knew it was going to end like this, Law roared, running away. Immediately, Luffy followed him, allowing the bird to pursue the two boys. Mugiwara, don't follow me. I don't want to be involved in your troubles, Law stated, trying to change direction to shake him off. Hey, don't leave me. But, actually, can you run? I never said otherwise, fool. No sooner had he finished pronouncing these words than the bird struck them, like a missile. Before they could comprehend the situation, they crashed hard into the ground. It's too fast, Law remarked, putting a hand to his forehead. There's no use trying to escape it. We have no chance of losing it. However, taken by its momentum, the bird had to break several meters to be able to stop and turn around, which left a handful of seconds for the boy to find a way to escape. Without wasting a moment, he looked around to take stock of their situation. Next to him, Luffy and the stewardess were already trying to get up. However, like Law, they suspected that running would be useless against this monster, as fast as a meteor. Instead, they had to find a hiding place. Examining the topography of the place, and he succeeded, by a miracle, in finding a hiding place. A stone lair, dug into the face of a cliff, stood not far from them. The opening was big enough for them to slip us through, but too narrow for the bird's massive body to do the same. However, he had no way of knowing if it was large enough to accommodate 3 people. If we can reach it, we might have a chance to escape it. It is quite far from us, but it is playable. Luffy, the lair. He shouted at him, rushing towards the opening. At that moment, the bird was already beginning to turn around and rush towards them again. When Luffy arrived in front of the opening, he forced the air hostess to enter quickly. Then he did the same with Law. Come on, faster, it's coming. Indeed, the bird was only 2 meters away from them. Without losing a second, Luffy slipped, in turn, into the cavity. Like a rabbit, followed by the animal's huge head. A hiding place was nearly 3 meters deep. Luffy had just enough time to flatten himself at the bottom with his 2 companions before the bird introduced its neck into the den. As Law had thought, built as it was, the bird couldn't fit any other part of its body. Also, with its tape measure, its neck was much too short to be able to reach them. On the other hand, added with its head of 60 centimeters, the beak of the creature represented a real threat for their legs. It just had to plant it in one of their feet to be able to hoist them out of their hiding place. Go away. Don't come any closer. The stewardess ordered it, bending her legs as far as possible. Instantly, Luffy was tempted to throw his fist at its beak. Nevertheless, anticipating his gesture and fearing the consequences, Law grabbed his arm to force him to remain calm. For more than a minute, the bird tried to grab them with its hooked beak, made to cut into flesh. It constantly changed position, withdrew its head several times in order to reintroduce it, in the hope of gaining a few centimeters. He even pushed on its legs so that the trio thought twice that it had gotten stuck in the cavity. However, after multiple efforts, it finally realized that it was impossible for it to dislodge its prey. So he finally pulled his head out of the hole and uttered his shrill cry again. Then, after a last glance in the direction of the cavity, it moved away from the hiding place and returned to its nest, returning empty-handed. We were saved, Law stated, heaving a long sigh of relief. For his part, Luffy didn't know if he should start screaming with fear or screaming with joy because of the excitement that this chase had just given him. 15 minutes later, Luffy rinsed his face in the stream, where he was in front of before hearing the cries of distress. The coolness of the water allowed him to calm down a bit. Still, as he felt the water running down his face, he struggled to wipe the smile off his face. This time he was smiling, feeling the joy of still being alive. Shahahili, I really thought we were going to die, he confessed. Nevertheless, we managed to survive against this big chicken. Your hideout was great, Trao. Luffy received no response. By the way, what was that giant chicken? I didn't even know it could exist. It's the first time I've seen such an animal. Noting that no one answered him again, he turned to his 2 makeshift companions. At that moment, he then saw the stewardess crying, her face hidden in her hands and Law typing on the keys of his laptop. Staring at the object's screen, Law seemed to completely ignore Luffy. Hey, Trao, I'm talking to you. Stop calling me Trao. Law growled, continuing his business. A little surprised by her behavior, Luffy ends up crouching down in front of the stewardess and asks her, Hey, how are you? Are you going to cry all day? Sniffles and tears were the only responses from the young woman. Hey, it's over. We escaped that bird of doom. We don't need to worry anymore. We probably won't see it again. I guess. Trao, are we in security here? For only answer, Law growled, listening to his nickname. Sniffling again, the hostess asked, Why did this bird attack me? No idea. Luffy confessed. Maybe it wanted to eat you. Hearing this, the young woman shivered in fear, before affirming, If it wants to eat someone, this monster will start hunting and it will surely find us. No, I don't want it to find us. Hearing her sobbing again, Luffy brought his hand closer to her face. Hey, raising her face, the stewardess was surprised to feel Luffy flick her forehead, which made her wince in pain. Ouch, the young woman complained, placing her hands on her forehead. Why did you do that? I'm tired of hearing you cry. Luffy confessed. Do you really think this is how our situation will improve? But I, lowering her gaze, she finally confessed. I'm scared. I can't understand what's going on. Letting out a weary sigh, Luffy nodded. Me too, I can't understand. But that doesn't make me sit around and cry, hoping it helps. Stopping sobbing, the stewardess turned to Luffy before asking, "Why aren't you afraid to die?" "Why would I be afraid to die? Whether it's here or in my high school, I will fight any danger to stay alive. No matter what, I will achieve my dream." "Your dream?" Starting to smile, Luffy correctly positioned his straw hat on his head before affirming, "I am Monkey D. Luffy, the next ultimate X-Fighter master. That will be me." "The what? What is your first name?" Luffy asked. It's Shirahoshi." "Okay, in that case, know that we won't die. All we have to do is find the plane and the others, and then we'll wait for another plane to come and save us." At that moment, Law said, "Mugiwara, I don't think it will be that easy." "Huh?" Luffy wondered. "What are you talking about, Trao? And why are you playing on your laptop?" "I don't really know how it works, but you must not have network access on this island. Am I right?" My cell phone was not working. No response from him. Law was back to typing on the keys of his computer. "Hey, Trao, stop ignoring me. Trao, 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 Tra. Shut up," ruged Law. Then, exhaling to calm himself down, he finally motioned for Luffy to come closer. "First of all, anyone would know that it's impossible to get internet on this island. But I don't need it right now. And using software that allows me to use an offline network, I can still manage without Wi-Fi. Besides, for the moment, all I need are the documents on my computer." "What for?" Luffy questioned, looking at his PC. At that moment, Luffy stopped talking. On the screen, Law had just displayed an image representing the giant bird that had attacked them. "The giant bird. Where did you find this photo?" "I'm on one of the databases that I saved on my computer. I have hundreds like this one. It's very practical for lessons. This photo comes from an illustrated computer encyclopedia." "Is that what you do when I see you alone on your PC?" Luffy questioned him, looking bored. "Your life must be really boring." Feeling a vein form on his forehead, Law heaved a weary sigh before affirming, "Forget it and focus instead on the problem that concerns us. In fact, there is a problem." "What problem?" "Are you talking about the giant chicken? By the way, do you think we can eat it? Given its size, we'll have enough meat for a meal or two." "Mugiwara, please use your brain. Just 2 seconds. What's up?" "The bird you call giant chicken. It shouldn't exist." "Huh? What do you mean?" "Looking like that bird shouldn't exist, Luffy," the high school boy told him. "To tell you the truth, this illustrated encyclopedia is not ordinary. First, it is a database dedicated to extinct creatures and not to living species today." "Huh?" Luffy wondered, tilting his head to the side while crossing his arms. "What are you talking about?" "However, it's simple, stupid guy. I was sure I had already seen this kind of bird somewhere, so I searched everywhere in my databases to get its detailed file. This animal is called Diatrima. It existed 50 million years ago. This species is believed to have been extinct since that time. Disappeared." Luffy repeated. "Are you stupid or blind? We just saw one just now. You're not even going to tell me it was our imagination. Are you sure what your site says? You said it yourself. No one has ever seen this kind of animal. Have you seen its size? Do you honestly think it would be unknown when it would easily get the record for the largest bird of this planet? Next to it is an ostrich the size of a chick. You have only looked at what is written." Without hesitation, Luffy nudged Law and stared at the image of the creature displayed on his computer. While examining it in detail, Luffy began to read everything the site could tell him about the giant bird. Eventually, he had to admit it. This chicken, it is indeed an extinct species. However, it is this animal that we have just come across. Apart from the color of the plumage, it is perfectly identical to the one in this representation. But how is this possible? No idea, Law confessed. Then inspecting the rest of the photo gallery, which was devoted to the Diatrima, a detail finally caught his attention. What's an animal? Luffy wanted to know, pointing to a small horse in one of the images, where he was depicted dead at the foot of the bird. In a few clicks, Law presented him with the detailed file, as well as the image of the animal in question. It's a Hyracothureum, the dawn horse. He told him, It is the first member of the evolutionary line of the horse. It is best known for the fact that it had toes instead of having hooves, like its descendants. Luffy barely listened to every second word of all his explanations. Instead, he visualized the image of this familiar equine. "It's the little hoofless horse I saw earlier," Luffy stated. "It was eating a piece of fruit. I've never seen such a small horse. He lived and died with diatryma," Law affirmed. "Another extinct species." Luffy managed to understand. This island was definitely getting weirder and weirder. And, strangely, it wouldn't surprise me to also learn that the flying squirrel and the giant beaver are two extinct species. Immediately, Luffy felt a migraine caused by a headache. Thinking gives me a headache. What's wrong with this island? Feeling Luffy push him further to look at his computer screen, Law clapped his hand on his cheek in order to make him back off. "Move away, Mugiwara," the schoolboy ordered him. "You bother me." "Hey, you could be nicer. Just letting you know that it's thanks to me that you're still alive." "Are you kidding? I was almost killed because of you." "It's because you're just selfish. It is you who is completely oblivious." Repeat. Immediately, Shirahoshi didn't know what to do, starting to see the boys disappear in a cloud of dust. As they fought, "You'll see if I'm unconscious. You are a total moron." "Ouch, not the butt." Calm down," Shirahoshi implored them. Finally, a few seconds later, Luffy was sitting on the ground with a scratch mark on his cheek, while Law was completely disheveled. Having gone back to his computer, he groaned. "Are you calm, Mugiwara? You started it," Luffy retorted, pouting. Seeing some tension between the two boys, the stewardess tried to find a way to calm the situation. "Do any of you have any idea where we are?" "Seeing this environment, I can affirm the fact that we are indeed on a desert island," stated Law. "How are you sure?" Luffy wanted to know. "I mean, it seems to be true, but many other islands in the world have the same landscape, yet are inhabited by man. Grandpa once took me to this kind of island so we could playing survivors. First of all, it's only on a desert island and isolated from the rest of the world that we can have the tiny chance that we have of coming face to face with extinct creatures," the boy explained to me. "Plus, it's almost 6 o'clock. So looking at the position of the sun and the distance that separates us from it, I can pretty much know where we are. That's how the Mayans were able to navigate in the middle of forest." Luffy said, not really understanding his explanation. Seeing a vein of anger appear on Law's forehead, Shirahoshi intervened. "The Mayans. I didn't know they were able to do this. But, so, are you telling me that you really know where we are? Look at this." On his screen, a map of the world had just appeared. He zoomed in until he got an enlargement of the southern coast of Japan, the Pacific Ocean, and the surrounding islands. "This is our plane ride," he explained to them, creating an invisible line with his mouse, which flew from Guam to Japan. Then he pointed his mouse at an exact spot in the Pacific Ocean, closer to Guam than Japan. "Knowing that we flew about an hour and a half, we should normally be on an island in this area. So we know where we are," Luffy remarked, trying to simplify his explanations. "So our situation is not totally hopeless." "Yes, however, there is a but, which we are on an island in the Pacific Ocean between Guam and Japan. But the problem is that there are no islands in this area," Law affirmed. "Not even any for hundreds of miles around." "What do you mean?" "If you try to find this island on a map, you'll never be able to see it because it wouldn't be listed there," his comrade told him. "To put it simply, we are on an island that shouldn't exist." At that moment, Luffy remained completely still. An island that doesn't exist. It's impossible," Shirahoshi retorted, starting to panic again. "That kind can't happen. I would like to believe you," Law assured her, while remaining perfectly calm. "Maybe you just looked the wrong way," Shirahoshi affirmed. "Do you take me for an idiot? There's nothing to look at," he informed, putting his cap back on his head properly. "You know very well that I have a scientific mind. If I could, I would tell you that all of this could easily be explained by science. But this situation defies all logic. No matter how hard we try to hide it, it is clear how strange this island really is, to the point where I wonder if we're just dreaming." Hearing this, Shirahoshi took 2 steps back. Then she fell on her buttocks before starting to cry again. Enough. I've had enough. Staring at the two boys, she screamed. Today was my first flight. There was no way we would end up in a place like this where such animals were targeting us. She suddenly spread her arms as if to present her uniform. Look at the state I am in. I look awful. It is true that her uniform, as well as the tights she wore, were torn or stained in certain places. In addition, her face was covered with a thin layer of earth, and pieces of wood from the nest had become entangled in her hair. Her mascara had smudged, and the red polish she had gotten on her fingernails was a distant memory. A good shower and a new outfit were urgently needed. She suddenly burst into tears. I failed my employment exam 3 times, she continued. Yet I kept working like crazy to get it. And when I finally got it, why does this stuff only happen to me? Growling in frustration, Law seemed embarrassed by her crying. But before saying anything, he saw Luffy shaking. Mugiwara, an island that does not exist, and creatures that have disappeared. Suddenly, Luffy lifted his face and showed a huge smile. So awesome, huh? Law wondered, while Shirahoshi stopped crying. It's like an adventure, Luffy affirmed. I have a feeling we're going to have fun here. Asshole, Law roars. Do you think it's time to have fun? Then, he chose this moment to close his computer and declared, we really don't have a choice. Obviously, if we want to leave this island, we will have to wait for help to arrive. If the plane has landed in the vicinity, then we will be sure to meet them tomorrow evening. At the latest, we'll stay here for the night. When it's light, we'll search for the location of the device and any survivors. Everyone could only nod, listening to him take the instructions. After eating some fruit and getting dehydrated from drinking in the river, Luffy lay down on the ground. Strangely, he was barely lying on the ground when he fell asleep like a log. The events of the day had more than exhausted him, and his body really needed to rest. Besides, he didn't really feel fear like the others. He wasn't worried. In truth, he was excited to be able to explore the island, and he hoped that soon he could do it with his friends and be able to live a great adventure all together. However, in the middle of the night, he ends up being awakened. Opening his eyes and straightening up, he finally saw Law. Lit by the fire I had lit a few hours ago, he sat in front of his laptop. Next to him, the boy had gathered a pile of kindling to supply the source of heat and light, as if he had planned to have an all-nighter. Aren't you asleep, Trao? Luffy wondered. Imbecile. If everyone is sleeping, who will watch the others in case we get attacked? Mugiwara, it is not because night has fallen that the danger is no longer present. Oh, you're really smart. You are the one who lacks judgment. Moaning, Shirahoshi pushed a little in his sleep. Unlike Law, the stewardess seemed to be sleeping soundly. At least she's not terrified to the point of losing sleep. Luffy remarked, it's already that. TSSS. So far, this woman is of no use to us. I hope she will be of some use during our research. Wanting to take advantage of the fact that she couldn't hear them, Luffy ended up calling his friend. Law, him, the boy wondered, surprised that Luffy used his first name. It's true that I am excited to explore the island and discover its secrets. But, for you, what are we really going to become? When you were talking about the rescue and the stay, did you really mean it, or was it just to reassure us? To answer your first question, I confess that I have no idea. Considering everything that is happening on this island, I'm not even sure that we are still in our time. If it is, tomorrow we'll wake up in the Colosseum, with lions and gladiators before us. Or else, in the age of the dinosaurs. Do you really mean what you say? Mugiwara, he sighed. We just landed in a weird way on this weird island. There's movie making, right? He wasn't entirely wrong. Yeah, but Luffy started, trying to formulate his next question correctly. We're going to find all our friends, aren't we? He shrugged his shoulders in a sign that he wasn't at all sure. Not very optimistic, despite the fact that he was afraid to know how his friends were doing. Luffy ended up going back to sleep, wanting to be in good shape to find them tomorrow. 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 To find them